And now we'll reach at the end of the road for my Devil May Cry reviews as we look at what is perhaps the most controversial game in the Devil May Cry franchise, that is to say, the Devil May Cry Reboot that was developed by Ninja Theory. And note that I'm going to say Devil May Cry Reboot when I'm going to refer to the reboot since, well, the title for it is really stupid. Now, fans of the original Devil May Cry series do seem to really hate the reboot, and I mean really hate it. Some proclaiming that the reboot is the worst game in the series and is an absolute disgrace, others saying that is an absolute unnecessary reboot that doesn't need to exist, and the list of negative comments just keeps piling on. Now, does the Devil May Cry reboot deserve the ire that fans of the original series are giving it? I'm in the camp that says mostly no. No in the sense that as judging it as a standalone game, I don't think the game is as terrible as fans are making. Albeit I do think it's one of the weaker games in the franchise overall, and some of the game design decisions are kinda questionable, as well as some of the writing in regards to what they do to the established character in the original series in this reboot. But the Devil May Cry reboot, at the end of the day, is still a decent game. And it's not even the worst game in the series. Devil May Cry 2 got that position covered, and it's well earned. Seriously, I would rather play the reboot, which I established is just an okay action game, 10 times over rather than going through one playthrough of Devil May Cry 2. But still, I guess I have to elaborate more on why I don't think the reboot is as bad as fans are making it. So let's not waste any more time and go straight to this review. Hello, I am Peter47890/Sirus and welcome to what is perhaps the last part of my Devil May Cry reviews, a series of videos where I be looking into the various games of the Devil May Cry franchise and see how they hold up as action games. And for today, we will be looking into the most controversial Devil May Cry Reboot.
This was your home. I don't remember it. You will.
Now visually, I think the game is really appealing in this department. Okay, I'm not that much of a fan of the redesigns to the established character in the reboot, like Dante's and Virgil's design, but I have to say that the visuals that we see in Limbo is just a spectacle. The various locations in Limbo that we traverse to are vibrant, varied, and just really creative in how you see the contrast between the real world and Limbo, as you see Limbo distorts the physical environment from the influences that the various demon has on Limbo. The environments are also very dynamic in that regard as well. The animation itself is also good. Why the animation in the various cutscenes in the reboot doesn't have the flair or cinematography that 3 and 4 had, especially since there is barely any fighting cutscenes in the reboot outside of a few scenes, but most of the cutscenes in the reboot is mostly setting up the story and seeing the aftermath of various events that take place in the game. But I still say that the Devil May Cry Reboot still has some nice mocap in the cutscenes of the game itself. As for the in-game animation itself, I say the game is pretty good in this department, with most of the attack animations you see that Dante do in the game to be pretty flowing. The game doesn't run as smooth as the previous Devil May Cry games, but at the very least, I didn't really run into any performance problems. The sound design, on the other hand, I have a few mixed feelings with. For the soundtrack, I'm a bit mixed, since it's not to my taste. The dubstep I find really unappealing to me, though that might be because I find dubstep in general to be not the type of music that I like listening to. The other type of music in there are okay, I guess, but I wouldn't say I really enjoy the music in the reboot as much as the other Devil May Cry games. The voice acting is decent. They do a decent job of portraying the various characters that they play as, but I have to admit that the dialogue itself can be pretty bad at times. I mean, I'm sure the voice actors are doing their best with what they had. It's just that the writing revolving around the dialogue can be pretty awkward and cringe-worthy at times with how edgy it tries to be. And while the original Devil May Cry did have cheesy dialogue, they were done in a way that they were fun to listen to and add to the character likability. And the old Devil May Cry games never really did take themselves too seriously, while the reboot does. Now let's get on to the story of the Devil May Cry Reboot. You basically play as Dante, a Nephilim, which are beings that are half angel, half demon. Yep, you heard that right. Dante isn't half human in this reboot, with him basically just minding his own business at the start of the game while he gets interrupted by a strange girl named Kat, who says that he has been discovered by a hunter demon and says he has to escape. But just after that, he is dragged into limbo by the hunter demon, a realm that lies in between Earth and Hell, which is like a twisted reality of the human world, where demons roam and basically influence the real world from that realm. After dealing with the hunter demon and returning to the human realm, Kat then takes Dante to the Order, an organization that was made to combat the demons, who has taken over control over society from behind the scenes from Limbo by controlling politics, media outlets, commercial products, and the like. Oh hey, Fox News is on the air! And it's at the Order where he meets Virgil, who's the head of the organization. At first, Virgil asks him to join the organization to put a stop to Mundus' regime, who's a demon lord who's basically controlled the demons who has taken over the world basically. While reluctant, Dante eventually agrees as he's shown his past by both Virgil and Kat, and eventually agrees to help Virgil, who he remembers as being his twin brother. Yep, Dante and Virgil are fighting together in this reboot. And the story from there is basically Dante and Virgil finding ways to basically take down Mundus so they can free humanity from the demon clutches. So yeah, the reboot did change a lot of things that are standard to the original series mythos. Dante and Virgil being half angel, half demon, Sparta not being the badass Dark Knight in this iteration, but instead is Mundus' lieutenant who eloped with an angel. But the most dramatic changes are probably the character personalities. Now, this is a reboot, so changes are expected, but a reboot still have to have the spirit of the original, and I don't see that in the reboot. Now, I'm up for a change of environment, a change of tone, but everything has changed so much from the original, like the mythos and character personalities, that the reboot feels more like it was inspired from Devil May Cry, rather than putting a new spin to the series. And I think that is the key concept to take into consideration when talking about the reboot as a whole. That it feels like the game was inspired from Devil May Cry, rather than it being a reboot, and as a result, the reboot feels really pointless to the series. But let's ignore that for a bit and see how the story and characters hold up by themselves. I don't think they hold up very well. I mean, there are some stuff I like in it. I like Kat. I mean, she does play the damsel of distress role in the storyline, but at least she has a helpful personality and does actually help Dante in the storyline, whether that be helping him escape from Limbo, or coming up with a plan for the fire mission, or helping Dante develop into a better person, and etc. At the very least, I probably do like Kat more than I do Kyrie and Lucia. Another thing I like is the character moments between Kat and Dante. They're very nice to listen to, and does give us a chance to see Dante and Kat relationship develop further. But the writing overall is less than desirable. The dialogue, as I said, is pretty bad and can make it quite a trek to go through the game. And it does add to the unlikability of certain characters because of how obnoxious they are due to their dialogue, such as Dante in the reboot. And really, I think that is the main factor that detracted me enjoying the story and characters. I just found a decent amount of characters in this reboot to be either really unlikable or kind of boring. Albeit there are some renditions of the characters that I like better in the reboot than the original series, like Mundus, but those are far and few between. Mostly likable character thing going to Dante, with how obnoxious he is through most of the game, I felt. Though also going to Virgil as well, because of a certain scene that happens in the game, as well as something that happens like late in the game, which is, by the way, built up very poorly and just feels contrived. Okay, presentation, story, and character is one thing, but did Ninja Theory's reboot capture the fun gameplay of the original series? I say it's a good attempt, but there are several issues to the gameplay in the reboot that makes it not quite as strong as the other games. But let me elaborate first. First, I explain the structure of the game, the combat, and the miscellaneous stuff later on, such as the difficulty settings. Now structurally, the reboot is similar to the other Devil May Cry games, with you basically hacking and slashing through various enemies in the individual levels, with there also being some slight adventuring aspects and platforming sections thrown in each level, with you fighting the occasional boss that appears at the end of certain levels. And at the end of the level, you'll be rewarded at rank based on how well you did, with you getting more red orbs and white orbs for the higher rank you get, which are respectively both used to buy either items or upgrades. Now structurally, the reboot is mostly fine in this department. For one, I think the platforming sections are actually quite fun to go through in terms of using Dante's demon and angelic whips to basically swing through the levels, which are quite engaging compared to just walking around the levels, especially when there is a set piece involved in the game. And as a section to give players a breather between the fights, I think it does a good job in that department, with it making the non-fighting sections to still be engaging to a degree. The controls for the platforming sections are also pretty responsive. Now, can there be a bit too many platforming sections at times? Yeah, but I still don't think there's too many of them that drag the experience down. The levels themselves are also spacious enough to fit the over-the-top hack and slash gameplay that the game embodies. And one thing I do like in the structure is that various enemy types in the game will have an extra or extended attack when you fight them in the higher difficulties, which I think is a nice touch. So yeah, I think the structure for the reboot is fine overall. But let's get to what everyone wants to talk about in a Devil May Cry game: the combat. The reboot, like its predecessor, plays out like a hack and slash game, with you controlling Dante, who's got a variety of weapons he's able to employ throughout the game, from his sword Rebellion to the various angel and demon weapons he's able to use, with the demon weapons being your typical slow but hard hitting weapons, and the angel weapons being your fast and wide range hitting weapons that's ideal for crowd control but isn't as strong as Rebellion or the demon weapons. And at last, and certainly not least, Rebellion is basically the middle contrast between the angel weapons and demon weapons. And each weapon that Dante has got different amount of moves he can use. You can also switch between all 5 weapons on the fly during combat with the use of the L2 and R2 trigger buttons and the control pad. Along with his demon and angel weapons, Dante will also be able to use angel and demon whips, which will allow him to get closer to enemies, whether by pulling them closer or pulling himself to their location. Dante will also have his Devil Trigger ability later on in the game, which is essentially a super state where he'll throw everyone in the air and basically be able to wail on them, with him being stronger and being able to regenerate his health. The style meter is also in this installment, with you getting a higher ranking if you're able to get a good offensive on the various foes, as well as mixing up the moves. Though I have heard that damage input is one of the main factors of getting a high style meter in this game, which does make sense seeing how Trinity Smash would get me to an S rank instantly. The rank also doesn't decrease as long as you don't get hit, which is pretty different from the older games since the rank would decrease over time in the past games, although it does seem that time does play a factor when talking about going from the S rank to triple S rank and trying to maintain it. And I think the reward for getting a high stylish ranking in this game is mostly getting a better rank at the end of the level, since I don't really see a difference of red orbs and white orbs when finishing an enemy with a high stylish ranking or low stylish ranking during battle, which is kind of disappointing as you did get more orbs in the past games for getting a high stylish ranking during battle, which felt really rewarding, as in this game you don't really feel all that rewarded until the end of the level, I guess. But then again, getting a high stylish ranking in this game is so easy that it's not much of an accomplishment. But now let's talk about the significance of red orbs and white orbs in the game. Red orbs basically are used to purchase items that can replenish your health and Devil Trigger during battle, 2 permanent health upgrades and Devil Trigger upgrades, with the white orbs being used to purchase various moves and upgrades to those moves when Dante collects enough white orbs. Now overall, there are some aspects to the combat that are fairly enjoyable, but there are also some aspects that kinda piss me off. But let's look into the stuff I like. Firstly, the combat got a good pacing to it, with it being fairly fast paced, with the controls for them being rather responsive for what they try to do. I mean, I do think that weapon switching was more fluid in 3 and 4, with how you don't have to hold the trigger button in order to use the different weapons. But the upside in that is that Devil May Cry let you use 5 different weapons during combat, and it does so without being encumbering or overwhelming with the controls it does have. The various weapons that Dante uses are also fun and satisfying to use, with each being distinct with each other. Now, why the 2 demon weapons do seem to have the same weapon type, as in being the weapon type that is slow but hits really hard, I think the individual moves in the weapon themselves do keep them rather distinct, and the same goes for the angel weapons. Now, is the weapon variety or even move variety in Devil May Cry Reboot as distinct as 3 and 4? No, but I think they're distinct enough that you don't feel like the demon weapons and angel weapons are a copy of each other, which overall adds variety to the combat. There's also a decent amount of moves in the reboot to play around with, which adds to combo variety, and they do feel very flowing to use, with how you can continue a combo chain when switching to another weapon, such as the standard input for Arbiter's Trinity Smash is pressing the standard attack twice, pausing, then pressing the standard attack for Arbiter again, but you can also use 2 slashes from Rebellion, switch to Arbiter, pause a bit, then use the standard attack from Arbiter, which will also activate Trinity Smash. I thought this was a neat function, and it just feels fun to chain combos with different weapons because of the fluidity in the weapon switching. I also like the Demon Angel Whip function in terms of the mobility they can bring to battle. Now, are they exploitable? Yeah, they are, but they are still fun to use. I think the upgrading system is also fine. It got a good sense of progression with the different type of moves you can purchase. It's not as dynamic as the Proud Soul system, especially with how all upgrades in this game cost the same, but it still give a good feeling of progression with how each upgrade you get still feeling significant. So as you can see, I do enjoy the combat in the reboot to an extent. But of course, let's now get to the flaws of the combat in the reboot, because there's quite a few of them. The first, not being able to dodge out of your own attack animation, or simply put, dodge cancel. Yeah, this game doesn't have dodge cancel, and it can be pretty frustrating at times when you can clearly see an attack they can dodge out of, but can't because the game decides you have to fully finish an attack animation, where in past Devil May Cry games, well, in most fast-paced action games, you are able to dodge out of an attack animation you don't want to finish, which overall does make the reboot a bit clunky in that regard. Another problem, and it's a big one, no freaking lock-on. This is a problem. A huge problem, because there is a decent amount of time when you won't be able to hit an enemy you want to in the game. Especially the flying enemies. I mean, look at this! I believe that footage more than says enough why having no lock-on is a problem in the game. Another problem I got with the game is certain enemy types, mostly the color-coded enemy types, and that's because they restrict you to a weapon type, which really does limit your combo variety in the game. And for a series that is about combo variety, well, mostly because of 3 and 4, that's a problem. And even barring that, Devil May Cry 1, why that game having a smaller moveset didn't actually have enemy types that restrict you to use a particular weapon. I mean, certain enemy types were easier to fight with either Alistair or Ifrit, but you could still make do with either of those weapons, while in the reboot, You have to use a demon weapon to fight red enemies and angel weapons to fight blue enemies, which overall feels a tad restricting. And speaking of enemy variety, I have to say the boss fights in this game are kind of disappointing. Now, they're not technically bad boss fights, but they are pretty easy and rather forgettable. The only one that I say are decent are the final boss fights and the Bob Barbas fight, though that's mostly because of how the fight plays out, rather than it actually being a genuine tough boss fight. The Bob Barbas fight overall is still easy, but at least how you progress the fight is done in an interesting way. Though is it me, or does Bob Barbas' dialogue during the fight feels like something people who really hate the Devil May Cry reboot would say to Dante?
You're not big or clever, Dante. You're tiny and stupid. Get up, you little emo punk.
Now, the next flaw I'm going to discuss isn't exactly a negative point, it's more of a disappointing one, and that's mostly with how easy the reboot is compared to the original games. Yeah, this game is pretty easy compared to the old games, especially with how exploitable the whips can be in terms of air comboing the enemy, that and how easy the bosses are in this game. Now, is the game insultingly easy as Devil May Cry 2? No. Is it insultingly easy overall? I still say no. I mean, it's easy, but I never felt the game was so easy that I got the impression that it treated me like an idiot. Though I did start at the Nephilim difficulty, so there's that. And speaking of difficulty, let's talk about that. Devil May Cry the reboot got the Human, Devil Hunter, and Nephilim difficulty that's available from the start, with Son of Sparta, Dante Must Die, Heaven and Hell mode, and Hell and Hell mode being unlocked as you play through the higher difficulties, with Son of Sparta mode changing up the enemy placement as well as introducing exclusive enemy attacks that are in that mode. Though the extended enemy attacks doesn't really add much, it's a nice feature though. And Dante Must Die, Hell and Hell, and Heaven and Hell mode are basically what you expect, with Dante Must Die mode having enemies that devil trigger, which makes them stronger, being able to withstand more attacks and the likes. Heaven and Hell mode is basically everything dies in one hit, like the previous games, and the Hell and Hell mode is basically the enemies got normal health where you can only be hit once. I think I haven't actually tried Hell and Hell mode, mostly because I play so much Devil May Cry that I feel like I had enough playing the reboot through Son of Sparta mode. So in the end, do I like the Devil May Cry reboot? Because saying a game is overhated is one thing, and actually liking it is another. So my answer to that question is, yes? I mean, it's a flawed, heavily flawed title with some atrocious PR from Ninja Theory accompanying it, so I can sort of understand why fans hate the reboot, but at the end of the day, I still think it's a decent action game. Is it as good as Devil May Cry 1, 3, and 4 in my eyes? No, not really. But I still have some enjoyment out of it. It's visually interesting, the level design is pretty good, the combat is fun in terms of using the arsenal weapons that Dante uses, which are fun and satisfying to use, with this weapon switching being pretty fluid. I mean, I can understand why some people might not like the game due to how easy it is compared to the old games, and how some mechanics are exploitable like the whips, and the boss fights being not all that fun to play against, and not to mention some characters being rather unlikable, as well as some distasteful scenes in the game that might piss fans off. But all in all, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have some fun with the title.